Sarah Meixel with thecattlesite.com, and today we're here with Ruaraidh Petre. He is the Executive Director of the GRSB. Thanks for being with us today, Ruaraidh.
Thank you for inviting me.
Tell me a little bit about the greenhouse gas initiative that GRSB has undertaken.
Sure. We are using a company called Varesco from Canada to help us in the first phase of a project to look at greenhouse gas accounting methodologies. So the issue that we've got is that cattle production systems around the world are being criticized for their greenhouse gas and their climate impact. But the thing is that in all of these different countries, the methodologies that are being used to account for the climate impact and the emissions of the systems are different. So for example, the system boundaries in one country might be defined differently from in another country. Or you might have a situation where some of the baseline assumptions you have about a production system, for example, the impact of feed, might be the same, even though in fact the production systems are different. So you've got two areas of discrepancy that could be leading to inaccuracies in the result. And in any case, whether or not they're inaccurate, they're not comparable with each other. So what Varesco has been looking at for us is simply an inventory of all of the different methodologies around the world which are currently under use and the life cycle analyses that they're coming up with and the basic assumptions and methodologies they're using. Next to that, they've also looked at some of the areas which aren't being covered at all. One of them, for example, is the carbon sequestration in soil. So that at the moment is not being accounted for in any LCA system. And it means that one of the positive impacts of good livestock management is not being captured in life cycle analysis. And we feel that it should be, because there's always going to be a trade-off between, if you're improving your management system, then you want to be able to demonstrate what that's done to your impact. And then there are some areas which are just currently not agreed upon, like how do you account for certain gases? Methane is a good example of that. At the moment, we tend to use something called the carbon equivalent, which means an equivalence to carbon dioxide. But carbon dioxide and methane do not behave the same in the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide stays in the atmosphere for hundreds of years, whereas methane degrades over a period of 10 to 12 years. And people talk about methane being a very potent climate gas, because in the first few years in the atmosphere, it has a strong warming effect. But the fact is, once you've gone past that 10 years, it's no longer having a warming effect at all. And so what we need to do is use a system which actually accounts for the warming it does over the long term, and not its equivalence to carbon, because that's just not a realistic comparison. So the University of Oxford and some other colleagues of theirs around the world have come up with a methodology called GWP star, which is essentially the global warming potential of different gases. And this accounts better for those short-term climate gases like methane. It doesn't mean that methane is not an important gas. We recognize that it has an impact on climate. And in fact, in a scenario where cattle numbers are increasing and methane emissions are increasing, this methodology will actually make things look potentially worse for climate. And I think the important thing about recognizing that is, if we are improving the efficiency and we're producing more beef from fewer cattle, we're having a cooling effect on climate. But if we're producing more beef from more cattle and not improving our efficiency, we're actually having a warming effect. So this is an encouragement to us to make sure we're doing things more efficiently.
Very good. And one of the things you mentioned earlier to me is that this isn't about kind of comparing country to country, right? This is about making sure countries are able to measure themselves, right?
Exactly. Many countries and many companies that are multinational companies have made commitments to reductions. But if we're not using a consistent methodology, then we can't really make a clear distinction between what our reductions have been. So at the moment we have these many different methodologies, many different tools and systems, and it's comparing apples to oranges. What we want to do is to get into a situation where we're converging the methodologies. We're still using the individual assumptions from different countries because we recognize the differences in the system, but we add them together. We use the same arithmetic, if you like, for each of those systems, so that we're comparing the real effect that we're having. And we can then realistically say, yes, our reduction targets are being met.
Very good. Great. Well, thank you so much for all the information today, Rory.
Thank you very much for having me.
This is Sarah Mikesell with thecattlesite.com.